everybody! Today we're going to make the polar bear rice warmer from the Feeling Festive Bella Box. The Feeling Festive Bella Box was on sale a few weeks ago and I grabbed one. This is last year's winter box. I'm going to go through everything you need to make this and we'll put our polar bear rice warmer together. Kimberbell is also coming out with a sea otter rice warmer. I'm going to guess it's put together the same way. Hopefully this video can help you with both projects. First thing you want to do is decide which size project you want to make. You can make it with a 5x7 hoop or an 8x12 hoop. I'm making the 8x12 hoop. I always use a sticky note to cover up what I'm not making, so when I prep my fabrics I don't make a mistake. Included in your downloads is a cutting diagram. This one is for the polar bear rice warmer. It shows you the fabrics, how to cut them, so that way you get the most out of your fabric. You're also going to need light mesh cutaway stabilizer, fusible backing. I've already done my cutting. Let me show you the fabrics. I put everything on a design board and I have little sticky notes. I use a pin so nothing slides. I can see I've got the back, arms, legs, ears, front. Everything has a little pin in it. Anything that needed fusible per the instructions, I already put the fusible on the back. I also pulled my threads. I like to keep my threads in my fabric wrapped rope bowl. I have a video on how to make one of these. I'll link it below. I'll be using a 7511 regular embroidery needle today. I've got my curved applique scissors and my snips. We're going to need water-soluble thread for our bobbin today. This is my first time using this type of thread. I read some posts and reviews and decided to try this brand. I'll link that below. You'll need your Kimberbell paper tape. The colors in the instruction are given for glide thread. I have Floriani thread and then I have one Simthread color here. I've got a color for charcoal, gray, it's kind of more of a silver, navy, teal, maybe more sea green, but I thought this would look good. I decided on red instead of burgundy. I like this color red. We needed a pink and then a cream. Here's a quick screenshot of all the thread numbers in case you're using Floriani threads. The little tiny pink thread is a Simthread. Here's that number. This project is made in 3 parts. We do the arms, legs, and ears first, then the polar bear, and then the rice warmer pouch. I've got my light mesh cutaway loaded into an 8x12 hoop, hand tighten, screwdriver tighten. Let's head over to our machine. I'm on a Baby Lock Meridian. All my files are on USB. This Bella Box came with a couple of really nice Bella Box USBs. I really appreciate that. I always use another USB. I've put all my Bella Box files on this. We'll be working through all the other projects. We're starting with our polar bear rice warmer. I put a little sticky note here to remind me I'm working on the 8x12. We're starting with the arms, legs, and ears. All you have to do is pull up that file, set, embroidery. I've got a neutral thread on my machine. We're ready to get started. The instructions say to use a visible thread. I'm fine with my beige thread. I can see that just fine on the stabilizer. The first thing we're going to stitch out is a placement line. You want to grab one piece of the arms, legs, ears fabric, place it right side up. You should have 2 of these cut per the instructions, but just grab one piece. The next thing we're going to stitch out is a tack down line. Haven't switched to a neutral thread and you were using a dark thread for your placement, switch to a neutral thread at this point. It actually said to switch to a neutral thread before this tack down, but if you haven't switched yet, don't worry, you're not going to see this tack down line in the finished product. The next thing we're going to stitch out are inner ear placement lines. Going to go right up at the top. You want to grab your inner ear fabric. This is the pink fabric. There is fusible on the back. Says to cover those lines, add some tape. It also shows tape on the side and on the bottom. I think this will be fine. You can watch me, and if it needs more tape, you'll know. Let's go ahead and stitch the tack down lines. The tack down lines have stitched. You need to trim everything outside of the lines. So you want to be left with the little ear-shaped pieces. Everything else needs to be trimmed away. Just thought I'd show this really quick. Where I'm starting for my trimming is in the center. I'm lifting and I'm trimming, being very careful with my scissors underneath. Don't cut your flannel underneath. So I'm going to separate these pieces and then trim around. Be careful of that fabric underneath. These are all trimmed. Switch to your pink thread and then we're going to stitch the satin outline. Once the satin outline has stitched, you want to grab your other piece of arms, legs, ears fabric. We're going to place this right side down, and then we need to cover that tack down line that was stitched earlier. That's easy to do because this piece of fabric is the same size as this piece of fabric. Just line up your pieces of fabric and then you'll be covering that tack down line. You don't have to worry about it. It does show adding some tape. I'm going to slide this off and add some tape, and I'm also going to change to my cream color for the next step. I added a piece of tape on all four sides just in case it's nice and smooth. We're going to stitch the arms, legs, and ears final outline and some trimming lines. Once that's stitched out, we're done with this portion of the project at the machine. We need to take this over to the cutting table. You want to get this out of your hoop. I'm going to peel my tape off. You can reuse the tape more than once. Stick it to something and we can use it for another part of the project. Then get this out of your hoop. I've got this out of my hoop. We're going to be doing some trimming. There's a great picture on page 16, number 13. It shows the final outline and the trimming line shown in red. And then we're going to go to number 14, remove from the hoop, which we did. We're going to trim arms, ears, legs directly on the trimming lines. Those are the lines shown in red. An easy way to tell this apart on your project is we want to trim on the lines that look like basting stitches. They're further apart, and there are also the lines that are on the outside. This stitch line right here, that's nice and tight, that's our final outline. That's what's going to hold the piece together. The first thing I'm going to do is cut away some of this extra stabilizer. If you've watched my videos before, you know I like to save things. I can use this in another project. I'm going to cut that away and cut this piece away. Now I'm going to separate the pieces. It'll be easier to hold rather than trying to hold the whole thing in my hands. Let's start with one of the bigger pieces. I think it's easier to see on this color. You can use your ruler, and while I was separating them, I could have done this, but you do have a straight line right there. So you can use a ruler and a rotary cutter to cut the straight line. What I'm going to do is cut the straight lines, and these lines here, they're straight until they get to the point where they arc at the top. I want to cut as much as I can using a ruler and a rotary cutter. I think I'll get better results. And I'm going to cut this side, lining right up along that trimming line, like that. And now I need to get a pair of scissors. I'm not good with a rotary cutter going around curves, so I want to use scissors for this. Grabbing the sharpest scissors I have, they're Kay Buckley Scissors. I have a nice set of these. I think I bought them Black Friday last year on sale. I want to trim right on that curved line. Much easier to do for me with scissors than a rotary cutter. You can actually just turn the fabric as you go. You don't have to worry about moving the scissors, just like that, and pull off any threads. You can see here at number 15, it shows clipping the curves to reduce bulk. If you've got a pair of pinking shears, it's a great way to reduce bulk without having to sit there and clip. You just need to be really sure that you don't cut into that stitch line. If you happen to cut into this stitch line, put it on your sewing machine or hand stitch it, tack it down. It'll be fine, no worries. I'm going to use the pinking shears. I'm going very slow. I want to make sure I don't cut into those stitches. And again, if for some reason I did cut into those stitches, I would just hand tack it down. That looks pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and trim right here. That's kind of like a rough corner. Smooth that out a little bit. And then the next thing we have to do is flip these right side out. When you go to turn these, you've got stabilizer and fabric on one side and fabric on the other. I'm going to turn them right side out. I'm going to say I'm very glad I didn't do the 5x7 size. I kind of have big hands, and turning itty bitty little things right side out is sometimes difficult for me. You can use your finger, get it turned as far as you can, and then grab a point turner to help with any of the awkward corners. I have a Clover Point Turner to help me with that. There's also a little Me Time turner, and I got that in one of the boxes. I think I left it in the box and put it on a shelf because I can't find it. Make sure it's nice and turned. That actually turned really well. Look how nice that is. That looks great. This flannel is very forgiving. You want to do this to all the pieces. Everything flipped right side out. The next thing they tell us to do is to give everything a good press and set it aside for later. So I'm going to take this over to my ironing board. I'm going to press it, and I'm going to put a clapper on top of it and just leave it like that until it's time for the assembly. The first step in part 2 has us folding and pressing the pieces of the back fabric. I'm going to wait until it's time to use these because sometimes I fold them the wrong direction and I just have to go iron them flat and press them in the correct direction. We need to load our polar bear file. And we're loading the one that's got the face detail on it. The polar bear front, 8x12 set, and we're ready to go. We're going to start with, it says a visible thread, just like before, for the placement line. And then it switches to a neutral thread. I'm going with a neutral thread for all of that. We're going to stitch out our placement line. The placement line stitched. I had 3 thread breaks on this, all right here up at the top. I decided to reload the file and try restitching the whole thing, and again when it got to the top, thread broke. Don't know why, it just did. Grab your front fabric, we're going to place it right side up and we're going to cover that placement line, and then we want to tape it. So once you're sure you've got that covered, go ahead and add some tape. It says to use a visible thread. I'm just leaving my beige thread on the machine, it'll be fine. We're going to stitch a tack down line, and then it's going to make some lines where we're going to be placing the ears, the arms, and the legs. The tack down and the notches have stitched. We're going to stitch out the scarf placement line. It says to place your scarf fabric right side up, covering the placement line, and we'll tape it and stitch a tack down. Once you've got your fabric placed, taped, we're going to stitch the scarf tack down line. Once that's stitched, trim everything outside of the line, and if you don't already have your cream color thread on, switch and put on your cream color thread. Once you've got that trimmed, we're going to stitch out scarf dots and flowers details. That's in the color cream. Switch to teal, and we're going to stitch out the scarf scallop details. Going to switch to burgundy. I'm using red. Then we'll stitch out the scarf diamond details. You want to change to your bobbin thread that has the water-soluble thread on it. It does say in the instructions water-soluble thread or visible thread. I think if you don't have the water-soluble and you use a visible thread, you end up needing to trim a lot of these stitches from the back. It's going to be my first time trying this water-soluble thread. I'm going to change my bobbin, leave the red color on the machine, and then we're going to stitch out the scarf fringe stitches. You can kind of see what the scarf fringe looks like. Later we'll be dissolving the water-soluble thread from the back, and I think it loosens this up and makes it fringe. I've never done that before. Put your regular bobbin thread back on your machine, and then put on your navy thread. We're going to stitch out the outline on the scarf. We're going to change to gray and stitch the nose. This is the gray I originally pulled and showed at the beginning, and now that I'm looking at it against the fabric, it's looking a little light. I went over to my thread wall and I pulled something a little bit darker instead. There's the color number for that. You can see the difference. This is definitely more gray, this is more silver, and then we're going to stitch the nose and the eyes in charcoal. I think these two look really good together. Switch and put on your gray. We're going to stitch out the nose. Switch to the charcoal. It's going to stitch a little more detail on the nose, the mouth, and the eyes. Once that's stitched out, we're going to go ahead and pull this off our machine. I'm thinking I probably could have picked a little bit of a darker gray. Let's see. Oh, it looks pretty good. That's dark enough. Under the bright light, I was worried. We're going to get our hoops off our machine. Don't take this out of your hoop. We're on step 18, which happens to be on page 18. We need to flip our hoops to the back. We're going to remove the bobbin thread. I use the water-soluble bobbin thread. Spray the fringe stitches with water, dissolve the bobbin thread, use a cotton swab or fingernails to rub the thread. Don't let it dry before you rub it, and lift the stitches. You should start to see small thread loops pop up on the back. If you used a visible bobbin thread, refer to these directions. Back of the hoop, spray bottle, cotton swab. Here we go. Oh, yeah, look at that. Thread loops, there you go. Let me go ahead and do the next one. It says to flip it to the front, and we're going to use tweezers to carefully lift the fringe stitches up and away from the tack down stitches to form the fringe. Tweezers. I'm gently brushing the tweezers down. I'm not even squeezing the tweezers. Just kind of sliding them under. Okay, there's that side. That worked really well. You can just sort of slide your tweezer underneath and then pull it down a little bit, and they kind of pop out. Look at that. Fringe. Let's get a close-up. Looks good. It tells you to let it dry before continuing. Since I'm filming and I want to keep this moving along, I grabbed a Kleenex. Just kind of blotting. From the front, it feels pretty dry. From the back, it does feel a little bit wet. What I'm going to do is take this over to my ironing board. I'm going to put my wool mat underneath to support this, and I'm just going to lightly dry iron on the back to get this part of the project dry. Be careful of your stabilizer. Don't melt your stabilizer if you're going to do this. I'm back over at the table. We're on page 18. We're going to work through steps 20, 21, 22, and 23 before we go back to the machine. There's going to be a lot of placing and taping. We're going to start with the ears. Pink side is going to go down. You've got some marks here, 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 and here. Have your tape ready. And it tells us to place the ears on the ear placement lines, extending 1/2 inch beyond this line right here. What I'm going to do is grab my little ruler. I want to measure 1/2 inch. Okay, 1/2 inch seems to be the length of that stitch. Yes, this little line here is 1/2 inch, and this line here is 1/2 inch. That makes it easy. Line this up like that, 1/2 inch, and you don't really have to measure. And then same for this one. This is 1/2 inch, so line up the edge right along like that. Then we're going to tape these down. It shows a piece of tape here on the outside and then on the inside. Double checking, making sure that this ear matches with this line. Looks good. I'm going to tape that. Checking this one as well, and we'll tape that. Be sure it's taped nice and flat, and then we're going to tape on the inside. He looks like he's got a boo-boo, and I'm putting a big giant band-aid over his face, doesn't it? Do one more piece of tape right here. Make sure you're looking at the white side of the ears. The pink side is facing down. Next, we're going to move on to the arms and the legs. If you've got any parts of this that are flat or that you don't think look right, poke it out now, because once these get tacked down, you won't be able to get in there and poke those out. These are all going to get placed the same way. We've got lines for the arms. These lines here look a bit longer. I bet they're 1/2 inch. They're 1/2 inch. So whatever side you want facing up is going to face down. 1/2 inch. Just match that top corner right along that, because that's 1/2 inch. And same thing here, 1/2 inch. And then my feet are going to go like this. The leg placement lines are here, and then there's a teeny tiny line there. I'm going to guess that's 1/2 inch. It sure is. So lay that down, match the edge up, and you've got that 1/2 inch. You don't have to worry about it. Same thing here. There we go. Now we need to tape everything just like we did before. So on the outside and on the inside. Next, you want to grab your back fabric pieces. We need to fold it and press it along the long side. And then we want to lay them on top of each other with the folds toward the center, overlapping 1 to 2 inches, making sure our whole project is covered. I'm using this 8x12 hoop. If I line it up along the ridge, I know that my whole project is covered, and I'll be overlapping in the center. That's kind of an easy way to do that. Let's do this side. You can tape things to your hoop. You can see I've done that. The Kimberbell paper tape isn't going to hurt your hoop at all. I need to slide this way up. Right to left, not a problem. It's sometimes top to bottom. I'm not paying close enough attention. It shows taping all the way across the top, the bottom, and the middle. We're going to take this over to the machine, and we're going to stitch the back tack down line. It looks like it's going to run around at least twice. Use your cream thread for that. I've got my cream thread on my machine. You're going to want to sit and watch this. You can feel the bulk where the little arms and legs and the ears are. I'm actually going to sit here with my hand on the start and stop key. That way, if it catches on anything, I can stop my machine right away. The ear is right here. I'm going to slow it down as it bumps over. I'm going to do that as it approaches everything. Once that's stitched out, grab your hoop, head over to the table, and grab your lining fabric. We've got to remove all of our tape. Some of this is stitched down pretty good. You're not going to be able to pull the tape out underneath that zigzag stitch, so do the best that you can. Grab your lining fabric. We're going to place that right side down, covering that tack down that we just stitched. Top to bottom, it's the same length, so that's an easy way to make sure your project's covered top to bottom. Check the sides, tape that, and it's going to stitch around, but it's going to leave an opening for us to flip this right side out. Let me put on some tape. Should still have the color cream on your machine. We're going to stitch the tack down. Again, keep an eye on it because it's going to be running over all of those bumps. Go ahead and take this off your machine. We're going to head over to the table. First thing we want to do is get off this tape. So remove all the tape. Once you've got your tape off, get your project out of the hoop. If you've got any big pieces of stabilizer you want to save and set aside, you can trim that off. The next thing is to trim 1/4 inch away from this lining tack down that just stitched out. Before I do that, I'm going to grab, this is a water-soluble marker. This came with one of the punch needle kits. You have a white one if you have clear blue tiles. You could also do this with a friction pen, or you can totally skip this step. This is something that helps me. It's not in the instructions. I'm just going to lightly mark right there where it didn't stitch. That's where we're going to be turning, because we do have to cut all the way around this, and I don't want to accidentally trim too far in. So there's the stitching, there's my little blue line, there's the stitching. I'm going to use my pinking shears to do the trimming. Before I do that, actually, I'm going to cut away some of the excess just so it's easier to hold. Now I can get my pinking shears, trim all the way around. It says 1/4 inch. Close but not too close so you accidentally trim the stitches. If you trim the stitches, put it on your sewing machine or hand stitch where you accidentally trimmed. It'll be fine. I'm going to go all the way around and watch out for your opening. Actually, when I get to this point, I'm going to leave extra. I always have trouble stitching it closed. So what I'm going to do here, I can always cut off. You can't add back on. Well, I guess you could sew more back on. I'm going to leave extra because we're going to flip this and then need to like fold it in and make it look pretty and seal it. So for the moment, I'm going to leave a little bit extra there. I've got this trimmed. Where you've got the ears, arms, and legs, I'm sure you saw I had to get both hands on there. It requires a little bit of a strong hand to get through that. So here he is, and I have the extra. This is going to help me when I turn it right side out and I have to fold and tuck, because I don't hand stitch clothes, I use my sewing machine. We're going to turn it right side out. It says through the opening in the lining, so like this. You might have to get your point turner to get in there. What you should be looking at is the lining on one side and then your overlapping backing on the other side. That looks pretty good. We have an optional step at this point. It says you can stuff the polar bear with fiber fill through the opening between the lining and the polar bear body. So you see the back of the body right there. And you don't want to stuff it to capacity because we need to leave room for the rice pack. I do have some fiber fill, so I'll go ahead and I'll stuff it, and that way we can see what it looks like, and then you can decide when you make yours if you want to do that. I've got my Soft and Crafty Premium Polyester Fiber Fill. I think this came from Joann's, I don't know how many years ago. No more Joann's. I probably won't need that much. And you want to take it in little bits. I know that seems weird, you just want to grab a wad and stuff it in, but if you do a little bit at a time, you'll get better results. So we'll just start with this. You really don't need that much. Spread it around inside. I think a little more will do it. This feels good. It's really not that much. It's just enough to give it a little bit of a squish. I had pulled all this out of the bag. Don't need it. It can go back in the bag. Now we're on step 30, page 19. Hand sew the lining closed. We went over that. I don't do that. If you look really close, you can kind of see it's going along that stitch line. This is why I decided not to do 1/4 of an inch when I trimmed. I gave myself extra. It's actually, I think, a really good idea to put this in because that's going to camouflage this bowl. What I'm going to do is fold this right on that stitch line. I'm going to press this. I'm going to take it to my sewing machine and just sew as close to the edge as I can. Here's where I stitched it closed. I did end up with a little fabric fold, but this is the lining, so I'm not worried about it. We're going to turn this right side out. He's going to kind of look like he had a rough night and he's wearing a bunch of band-aids. So flip it right side out, and then we need to remove the tape. You'll just fuss with him to get him looking as good as he can look. And then we have to make one more thing. We have to make the little rice pack that goes in the back. I'm really glad I put the polyfill in. I think that's a good move. It gives it a little bit of extra squishiness. He could have used a little bit more up here, but you can always just kind of massage the polyfill like that, and you can move it around. He's got a little more junk in the trunk than up here. He's a nice, comfortable polar bear. Go ahead and get everything flipped the right way. That's really cute. Look at that. The next thing we're going to do is make our little rice warmer packet. You need to load some stabilizer again into your hoop, and we're going to go over to the machine and stitch the rice warmer packet. We are back at the machine. Let's bring up the rice packet placement line. Let's see, polar bear rice warmer. Right there. Set. Embroidery. It says to use a visible thread. I'm using my beige, it's on the machine. We're going to stitch our placement line. My thread broke again in the exact same spot. Let me know if that happens to anyone. I'll go ahead and stitch out the rest of this placement line. The rest of my placement line is stitched. It tells us to take one rice pack fabric, place it right side up, covering that placement line. You can tell I've got my tape ready. Top and bottom covered. Yep. It tells you to tape this and then place the other piece right side down, so right sides together. I'm going to tape them both at the same time, and then it's going to stitch out the tack down line with an opening, and I'm going to sit here and stare at it because I have a feeling that it may break along that top loop. We'll see. That's all you need to do for this. Let's take this over to the table. You want to take off your tape, get the project out of your hoop, and then it tells you to trim it 1/4 inch away from that tack down line. It says to add notches. I'm going to use my pinking shears again, and when I get to this part, I'm going to leave a bigger opening like I did last time. That really helped me to be able to fold everything in and seal the edge and sew it on my sewing machine. We're going to turn this right side out. It doesn't say to remove the stabilizer. I am using Kimberbell's stabilizer with this. Since this is a product that's going to go into the microwave, if you're not using Kimberbell's light mesh cutaway, if you're using something else, I would be extra cautious if you're actually going to put this in the microwave because you don't know if the fiber content is the same. You don't want to, catch anything on fire. I'm going to flip it right side out. Another thing about using things like rice packs, if you've never used them before, you heat them up in increments and you watch your microwave. You don't throw it in, set it on high for a minute and walk away and go do something. Do 10 seconds, maybe 15 seconds, keep an eye on it, make sure it's going okay, and then you can kind of take it out and feel it. They do get really warm. I have a couple different rice warmers. They're very nice. I'm so glad I remembered to leave extra. It makes it so much easier because I'll be folding it like this and like that and then stitching it on my sewing machine. I'm going to go put some rice inside of this and stitch it closed, and we'll come back and see the final product. Here's my rice pack. It's all filled. You can see I didn't fill it completely. It's very squishy. Think about if you want to lay it over your shoulder or lay it over an arm or something. You don't have to fill it up completely. When you go to microwave it, you only microwave this. Don't put the polar bear in the microwave. He doesn't like it. He'll get mad. He might burst into flames because of the polyester thread, so don't do that. Let's put this inside the polar bear. And once you've got it inside, you just kind of shake it and squish it. And I feel bad. I'm like squishing his face. Let's flip him over. Oh, he looks so cute. I need to get my lint roller and get all the lint off of him. Here he is. I know he's sideways, but that's how he fits on the camera. Let's go ahead and bring him up. Very cute. You can do this project in a day. I prepped my fabrics yesterday and then I filmed this today. It took me about 4 hours to film, so if you're just working on this by yourself, I think you can get it done in probably 2 hours. It always takes longer to film. What a fun project. Leave me a comment below. Let me know if you're going to do the sea otter rice warmer as well. I may consider purchasing that for the channel depending on price and depending on if enough people want to see that, but I would think it's probably built the same way this guy's built. Thank you for joining me making the polar bear rice warmer from the Feeling Festive Bella Box. We've got lots more projects to make. Let me know what you'd like to see next. We've got a little pocket holder, the tile scene, the little zippy tea pouch, and the snap tray. If there's anything in particular you'd like to see me make next, please leave it in the comments box below. I'm also working on the latest Perfectly Pieced Hoop Studio, and then I have Sweetheart Street. I'm not sure where I'm going to work that in. I might save that for after the holidays. Let me know what you think. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Questions or comments, please leave them below for me. I look forward to making the next project with you. See you next time. Bye.